the magical cloud. Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. I'm kind of eager to have such a nice little intimate group with this conversation, but we are recording this so that you can feel free to share it, go back to it. If there are pieces of it that you really want to share, maybe with an adult forum, just feel free to use it. It will be within a couple days. I will have it posted on that same post page with all the resources. I'll add it to there so you can share it and use it and go back to it. But I'm really eager to have a smaller group because I think this is one of these topics that involves a lot of conversation and perspective sharing. So I hope you all feel comfortable sharing your perspectives after we hear from Deacon Sarah on this topic. And typically we've had somebody share a land acknowledgement, and partly because I forgot to ask for a volunteer and partly because from the fact that we're calling in from all different places across the country and are standing on many different landscapes, I actually wanted to share a story that is a little bit more relevant to the topic that we have at hand. Instead of a land acknowledgement, I'm sharing like a way of knowing acknowledgement. So first off, I kind of forgot to introduce myself. I think I know all of you on the call, but for those of you that I don't know, my name is Phoebe Morad. I'm Executive Director of Lutherans Restoring Creation, and I'm really glad that you joined us here tonight. All of you are Lutherans Restoring Creation. We are a grassroots movement promoting care for creation throughout all aspects of our church life. But especially pushing from the outside a bit, the ELCA, our institutional church. So also what I like to remind you all of is that as a grassroots movement, we are for the ELCA and they're with them, but we are not of the ELCA. So we're not in a budget line of our church. So just keep that in mind. If you like what we do and like some of the resources we share, please do consider supporting us because we are totally grassroots. Pretty frugal, but very grassroots, and appreciate any support you can give. So what I'm going to share with you is actually from a book I mentioned in our last call with Johanna Bernu. It's Keepers of the Earth, and it's something that I helped me teach my son fourth grade this past year, which I took anything I could get. I love the way that it mixed its Native American stories and environmental activities for children. And what I like how it did is it combined a lot of creation stories, all kinds of different stories from people across North America, for some of the first earth keepers, and combined it with environmental science education. But it always starts off with one of a story from people. These people, the Abenaki people of the Northeast Woodlands, so up in the main landscape. So I'm getting you into the story here, kind of in the middle, where Gluskabi is a hunter, basically saying to grandmother woodchuck that he's getting sick and tired of hunting all the time. So we came up with an idea of making a game bag that can fit as many animals as possible. Now Gluskabi went back into the woods and walked until he came to a large clearing. He called out as loudly as he could, "All you animals, listen to me. A terrible thing is going to happen. The sun is going to go out. The world is going to end and everything is going to be destroyed." When the animals heard that, they became frightened. They came to the clearing where Gluskabi stood with his magic game bag. "Gluskabi," they said, "what can we do? The world's going to be destroyed. How can we survive?" Gluskabi smiled. "My friends," he said, "just climb into my game bag. Then you will be safe in there when the world is destroyed." So all of the animals went into his game bag. The rabbits and the squirrels went in and the game bag stretched to hold them. The raccoons and the foxes went in and the game bag stretched larger still. The deer went in and the caribou went in. The bears went in and the moose went in and the game bag stretched to hold them all. Soon all the animals in the world were in Gluskabi's game bag. Then Gluskabi tied the top of the game bag, laughed, slung it over his shoulder and went home. "Grandmother," he said, "now we no longer have to go out and walk around looking for food. Whenever we want anything to eat, we can just reach into my game bag." Grandmother Woodchuck opened Gluskabi's game bag and looked inside. There were all of the animals in the world. "Oh, Gluskabi," she said, "why must you always do things this way? You cannot keep all of the game animals in a bag. They will sicken and die. There will be none left for our children and our children's children. It is also right that it should be difficult to hunt them. Then you will grow stronger trying to find them, and the animals will also grow stronger and wiser trying to avoid being caught. Then things will be in the right balance." "Kamoge, grandmother," said Gluskabi. "That is so. So he picked up his game bag and went back to the clearing. He opened it up. All you animals, he called, you can come out now. Everything's all right. The world was destroyed, but I put it back together again. Then all of the animals came out of the magic game bag. They went back into the woods, and they're still there today because Gustavi heard what his grandmother woodchuck had to say. So I open with that as another perspective and a story that I certainly use to help share with my son a little bit of the idea of natural selection and animals getting stronger because of how they have to maneuver against predators. But I read it in a different light tonight when I was looking through some other stories. So I wanted to share that with you as we really consider all of our perspectives as to how our relationship with animals, especially with animals as food, as sources of energy for us. And I'm so grateful to have Deacon Sarah Bowers join us from South Carolina. Many of you know her and were probably jealous because she got to hang out with that goat at our worship service. And but I'm just really grateful, and I want you to know, Deacon Sarah, that when we had a conversation with Bishop Eaton, the fact that your name came up and she said, "Oh yeah, Sarah's so cool." I mean, how cool is that? Anyways, but I'm really grateful to have you here, and I think I saw your husband in the background as well, but I won't mention his name unless he doesn't want to be seen. But I'm gonna hand this. Hello, I'm gonna hand it over to you, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much for having us. Yeah, I don't know. We have a 3-year-old and a 12-year-old, and so Brandon may have to step out for a minute. But I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brandon Bowers.
And we have Bowers Farm. We live in Pomeria, South Carolina, which I can guess that you've likely never heard of. And Pomeria is located in Newberry County in the Midlands of South Carolina. So maybe you've heard of Newberry College, which is one of our Lutheran colleges. And so that is like 15 minutes away. And so being in a group of Lutherans, maybe you've heard of the county that we're from. But I was planning to share just a little bit about myself and then a brief overview of our farm. There was one thing that Phoebe's asked me to kind of speak about as far as your conversation with Bishop Eaton and connecting with farmers. And then from there, kind of question and answers. Does that sound all right, Phoebe? Does that sound like a plan? Good, good.
Perfect.
So I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, which is in the upstate of our tiny little triangle-shaped state, and grew up in what I would consider the most perfect neighborhood ever. Other than not having white picket fences, I think it was pretty quintessential. Had the best neighbors. Like, it was, when I look back, a pretty amazing childhood. I knew nothing about where my food came from, and I could not have cared less. And then I went to Clemson University for college, which is an agricultural school. It's an agricultural land grant historically in South Carolina. Again, a school you may not have heard of a few years ago, but now with its stage on the national football world, maybe you've heard of Clemson. And that's where Brandon and I met. Clemson to me was a small town, and Clemson to Brandon was the big city. So that's kind of where we came from and where we met. We met through Lutheran Campus Ministry. So we're Lutheran to the core. We're always really good friends in college. And then after college, I did the Young Adults in Global Mission program through the ELCA. And a lot of those sites and placements are in agricultural settings. Mine was not. I was in a small town, almost perfectly sandwiched between Manchester and Liverpool, which had some farmland in England. And one of my friends had a farm, but it was just a bunch of land, and it was beautiful, but there wasn't any, no part of my job had anything to do with agriculture. And then after college, I came back and started working at a congregation as a director of youth and family ministries in Columbia, the state capital, right in the middle of the state. And that's when Brandon and I started dating. In college, our campus pastor had said something along the lines of that we would make a cute couple. And I was like, he'll never leave Pomeria, and I'm not living there. He didn't leave, but now I live here. So So then we started dating after college, and that's about when Brandon started his farm. And so I'll let him share a little bit about the very beginnings, and kind of what he had looked into, and then what we ended up doing.
So slightly different than that. I grew up here on this piece of property. I am the fourth generation that lived on this property. So my great grandparents lived here or moved here in 1938. Roughly on about 440 acres is what they started with. And were predominantly used for agriculture back whenever they first moved here. In just the transitions, basically my grandparents had farmed, but my dad had kind of been taught to, go and get a degree, go and find a job in the city, go work for somebody else, because the farm is not the best place to be and make an income. And so even my grandparents had all farm jobs. But they had moved more towards just having some cows and a few chickens, and that was it. But they were mostly raising cows and then selling the calves off every year. And so whenever I was a teenager, I really got into more wanting to raise some animals. I really enjoyed that. And so I had some chickens and goats of my own. And then during college, I kind of had to scale down and not really had a whole lot of that. And then when I came back out of college, just trying to learn, and my degree from college, even though it's agricultural school and we're farmers, my degree in college had nothing to do with agriculture. So I have a civil engineering degree. And so I, again, come back to the home farm and thought, okay, now's my chance to actually get some things established. And so start with some things. And so I wanted to look into what else could we raise? What else could I have? And then I really wanted to, my goal then was, I don't have a family at that point, but I said, I want to raise, our own food. And so how do we go about doing that? So then in the meat side of it, raising livestock for meat, really started that down the trail, just trying to look at how to do that and how to do it sustainably and healthy, and how do we raise it in a way that mimics nature, or that would be like our great grandparents would have had. And so my dad had remembered, and these stories came out even after we had started raising what we were raising. But my dad had been, as a kid, remembered them raising pigs and processing pigs on the farm. And stories since then have been like that my great grandparents used to process and have sausage and stuff like that. And then the folks would come that day as they processed it and buy it. And they were selling straight from there. Again, that had not happened for, some 40 years or so. But we started raising that. We were going to raise small batches just for us and start those kind of things. And then we realized that actually there's a lot of folks around that are interested in that style stuff, but aren't set up to be able to raise it, or aren't in a setting where they can want to raise it, or even have the ability to raise it or want to raise it. So it kind of spurred a business opportunity then to be able to, okay, well, what about if we raised more and then sold it off of the farm? Could that potentially cover our costs for our, livestock that we were raising and having for our family for meat. And it's really just kind of taken off from there. We raise, you probably see a lot of it on the logo, but we raise cows, goats, sheep, pigs, chickens. We have raised turkeys, ducks, rabbits as well in the past, and all of it for the consumption of meat, for processing. And we sell very few animals even off farm. A lot of the smaller ones really is what we do if we raise any to sell off farm, but most all of it is actually raised with the intent and with the final product being that we actually take it to processing and then sell the meat directly to families. And then as it's transitioned, in the beginning, we were selling a lot of it by cuts, and we were going to farmers markets, and we were selling a lot of it individually and trying to kind of really market it and push it. Now, really our kind of customer base, or our kind of shift is that we're actually selling to less families, but we're providing almost their entire meat source. And so they're buying half shares and our shares of our production, or what we're producing. And so we have several families that are actually on like basically they pay us a certain amount per month, and then they end up getting throughout the year like 2 half pork shares, a half beef share, a certain number of chickens, a turkey, and some other things that we'll add to their shares as well. If you've ever heard of like CSAs for vegetables, it's a similar idea, but definitely not the exact same. But it makes sure too that we are honoring that to be able to use the whole animal. So these folks will be able to get the entire, like all the different cuts, and we're not producing a bunch of chickens just for boneless, skinless breast. And so that's been a big part of our whole thing from the beginning, is that we sell everything. So, and not because we're trying to, make the extra dollars. Really, it does come down to profit, but we sell the feet, we sell livers, hearts, all organs from all animals, and we sell bones for bone broths. We sell pork skins and stuff like that. So we sell all of it. And that's a way that we make sure that just very, very, very little is going to go to waste. So I don't know if that's kind of a run, like a full kind of story there of that, but now our farm's been operational now for right at 10 years, and it's hard to believe, but it's been just about 10 years. And our 3-year-old daughter that we're talking about, I'm fixing to go check on, she that's all she's ever known. And so we were joking the other day about, even I was raised here on the same piece of property in a rural agricultural setting, but my grandparents raised them much differently than the way we raised them. And so they had a stationary chicken coop, and the chickens never moved. They were always in the same coop. Our chickens move every day or every couple of days at the most. And that's just what she's used to. So having a portable chicken tractor in her front yard that has laying hens in it that are producing eggs is just a part of the way that she's been raised. And knowing and realizing that whole circle of life, and how we process and we have the meat that our family eats.
Yeah, I think when I think back to like the first batch, our first thing that we did was pasture-raised chickens. And so Brandon also oftentimes makes sure people know that at the very core, we are grass farmers, because everything we do is based on pasture. And so when we were dating at this time, when he was doing the first batch of chickens, I did not participate in the processing at all. I was barely even present for it. And now it's kind of moved to the point where I do help with that. But that first time I was like, nope, this isn't for me. I don't want to see that. And now through the education, not only of myself, so a lot of times we'll have conversations. I'm like, yeah, but people don't know that. Like, I always think about myself, did I know that? And the answer was no. So people don't know that. And so trying to kind of share with people the whole process of what goes into your food. We always like to think that the food on your plate has a story, no matter what's on it. Even if it's a burger from McDonald's, like there are hands that have touched it, and regardless of the ethics of how it got to your plate, like it still has a story and people have touched it. And so to be trusted as farmers to raise food for people is an honor. And so being grass farmers, and then I know Brandon mentioned it, but it's a huge part of our farming practices, is that everything we do mimics nature. So the idea that like in the wild, animals don't stay in one spot. They aren't confined to a certain area, they move. And so even our cows, every animal on our farm is set up to move. We also both have jobs off the farm. And so like, it would be ideal if everything moved as often as it could, but sometimes there are things, because of our constraints of time and energy and just manpower, that maybe things, we have to find what works as a balance as farmers in our place, and then also between figuring out what works best on our farm. But we want things to mimic nature, to be as God intended. And I will always share with people that I wasn't necessarily interested or concerned about where my food came from when Brandon and I started dating. But I always say, like, I can get behind passion really easily. And Brandon, it's more than just, I want to raise the food for my family. It's a vocation. And so now I would say that it's part of my vocation, and we have different ways in which farming, like maybe Brandon is a little bit more hands-on with the animals, but this year we had our first summer camp for 3 to 5 year olds. And so finding ways to share the farm with people. I shared a picture on my social media of Romney Ann watching Brandon process a chicken. It was in what we have a trailer that the chickens are on, and I'm so sorry if this makes anybody uncomfortable, but like from live chicken to dead chicken all on one trailer. And so she's watching that process. And while we shy away from talking to kids about death and our food that was something living, like Brandon said, she's grown up around that, and she knows. One time someone was at the farm and said, well, where were the chickens that were in there? And she said, we processed them. And so like she knows, and she's understanding in her own 3-year-old way. And we will continue to have those conversations with her. With another quick story about Romney Ann and just her understanding is that we, when we get our chicks in, whether they're laying hens or for meat, we get them as day-old chicks, and they go into the brooder for so many days. Well, inevitably you lose some. They are shipped in the mail, and so some don't make it to our farm, and then some within that first day don't make it. And she wanted to help Brandon like move those out of the brooder. And so she, as a 3-year-old, like was helping Brandon, and she was moving too fast, and Brandon said, no, Romney, we respect these animals, like we still show them honor no matter what stage of this process it is. And so she's learning. I don't know if we've probably talked to, I know, there's questions too, Brandon's showing me.
There we go. Yes. Is your first one up already? Is your process organic? You said grass-fed, and how do you deal with pests, fungus, plant feeding?
Yeah, we are definitely not certified organic. That's become a really like arduous process to go through. What we have always said, and kind of our way to do it, is that we have nothing that we would hide from anybody. So we've always asked our customers that if you really want to see what we're doing, come and see it. It's an open door policy. You can come and see what we're doing, and then you get to verify it, versus somebody with a letters after their name that you have no idea who they are coming out and certifying it. And so we do pasture, we do all grass fed and rotation on our pastures. And a lot of that ends up allowing us to not have to use any kind of like pesticides or fungicides or anything like that, because our pastures actually have time to rest. And then also allows for like the parasite cycle to like dead end, because if you're moving them very regularly, those parasites are dropped. And then the next time that those are looking for a new host, the host is gone. The host has already moved. We also use our birds like our chickens, to help with that process. And we have some chickens and ducks and geese and stuff that are roaming free and with the pastures as well. And then those actually pick up some of those pests. We also use multi-species. So we have cows, sheep, and goats all together. Each one can have parasites, and each one has their own like versions of parasites. But all the other two are a dead end host for those parasites. So if a sheep picks up a goat or a cow parasite while they're out grazing, that parasite might think that it's going to have a host, but then that parasite ends up dying because of the fact that cycle's broken. That's not the right host for that. Now, if you've ever been around any animals or any of that, you would quickly know that there's gonna always be something that's gonna happen. And if that's the case, usually we just identify that. We would treat anything like that with whatever needs to be done, and then those animals would fall out of our program. And so over the years, we have basically genetically selected, not by microscope, but by actual production in our system. You know, if they do really well in our system, then they continue to succeed, and then their offspring are even better. And so that idea of doing that and keeping up with those. But
can I said I wasn't, can I share my screen? Is that okay?
Yes. And as I'm pulling this up, I have another question for you. And if you have to run to, there you go. I think you can share now. If you have to run, I totally understand it. Did that work? So I think you can share now. I was wondering too, with all this knowledge that you've learned, have you been able to share it with other, I assume, more traditional farmers? Do you feel like you can be a bit of a disciple with your farming practices?
I think it's definitely you. What's the saying? You want to be a disciple in not your hometown. Like you really can't do that super locally. Everybody around here thinks we're lost our marbles. Like most people.
But you've been there for a decade. Doesn't that show them something?
Yeah. Well, but most farmers around here like became farmers because they didn't really want to be around anybody, and they were like, "Well, we don't want to sell directly to the customers. Like that's just no. We want somebody to sell to the customers, so we just want to raise. We just want to be out here and raising cows and slinging this and doing." No, I kind of joke, but I mean there are this type and these management practices are definitely catching on. More and more folks are actually starting to raise their animals this way, even if they are selling still in a conventional way. It's kind of funny. Like I do say that, but like my great uncle he has a bunch of pastures and they all have gates, but gates are open. Like, so, I mean, like as easy as it would be to shut one gate, put them in one spot, only let them in that one spot. It's just not the way it's ever really been done.
So the idea of like intensive rotational grazing again is that animals move, and so we will have them in a smaller area, and Brandon talks about like a salad bar, but the salad bar's always got something sweet on it, and so the cows or whatever animals on the pasture knows what those sweeter grasses are, and so they're going to only eat the sweet ones. Well, if you kind of mob stocking is another word that's used, but if you confine them, then they're going to eat that spinach along with that sweet grass, and then when they move, they allow that piece of pasture to rest and regrow, so that it's like greener, flourisher, it's a better salad bar for them. And Brandon's uncle, there was one piece of land that's never had good grass. Well, then as soon as Brandon started rotating them, like he commented on how green it was, but also he's someone who has watched and commented on our pastures, but isn't doing it himself. So I don't know.
And to go back to that, we again mimicking nature in the fact that, like, if you think about in a grand scheme of it, like a wildebeest on the Serengeti, they're all in one big group. They move around. One of the reasons they're in one big group is predators, and so we don't have like full predators to be able to keep them into the right spots. But we use electric fence to keep them in the right spots or in one paddock, and then by moving them to the next paddock, again, it gives a chance for it, like by moving away from yesterday, it gives a chance to break parasites and break all that kind of stuff as well. But it also gives the grass a chance to regrow. And again, thinking of it as and the idea of being grass farmers, the idea of letting the grass have a break to be able to grow back is really important. In a conventional continuous grazing system, those cows, like Sarah said, the sweet stuff, they would go back to it about the time it would actually be able to grow just a little bit more bigger, back out of the ground or back out of the stubble, and they'd nip it off again. If you've ever learned anything, I guess like maybe physical science back in middle school, the plant has stored energy in the roots. And when a grass is a foot tall above the soil, there's basically, it mirrors, it's about a foot of roots below. And so if they take that and they chomp off all but 3 or 4 inches of it, the roots break off below. They first suck the energy up to the roots at the base, and they break the roots off, and then they use that energy to try to regrow and restart sprouts. If that energy is all lost in resprouting that and it being nipped again one time, then that stored energy is lost. If it has an opportunity to regrow, it'll actually hit a stage where it takes off really fast. I always joke and tell people when we're doing tours and stuff, just think about it. It's like the week you go on vacation and then you come back and your yard's like, wait a second, what happened? Like it just took off. That's because there was no pressure on it for that week. And so again, it's that point where it gets to a little bit taller, and then all of a sudden it'll really grow really, really fast. And then again,
quick question on that. Does that eventually kill the grass? Robert asks.
That's stressing. The continuous grazing way can definitely eventually kill it. And so, but by letting it grow back out and having that, actually we're seeing more and more species of different types of grasses and forbs coming out of our pastures. We also, I think one thing we haven't said is like we rent 2 other pastures because we have grown to a point, and so we borrow some pastures from local folks around here, and doing the same systems in their fields, we've been able to see some of that stuff coming back out in their fields as well over time. New species of grass or different things that are able to actually have a chance to grow, and because they've had that chance of rest and they've had like the chance to actually take in the fertilization or whatever, because we're actually
from the cows.
Yeah, we're actually able to like focus the fertilizer across one strip into one paddock, and then you move it to the next day, and this section gets its little dose of that, and so and the foot traffic to push down the seeds and those kind of things. It's just all of it. When you really start looking at it, I mean, there's no better system than the natural system of how things are just constantly on the move. There's birds and stuff that are always kind of circling over the top of those animals, so they're keeping up with the pests and stuff. And so that's
I think
that's kind of the cycle of it. But.
And that method also, when the grass breaks off, you're building topsoil, and when you have healthy topsoil, not only do you have healthy pastures, but then when it rains, you're able to hold on to that rain in the place. You don't have runoff, and so it's all of it. It's like it's keeping it all in one place. So when rain falls, we want to keep it in our pastures as long as possible. So building that topsoil helps with it. I think are you reading that question?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm reading through the one. Basically, setting up points of kids, seeing lions at the zoo eat a fresh dead horse, like more natural. Let's see, grew up north Illinois, Liberty, with a family of 7, drove for a half cow. Dad encouraged us to watch, but the 5 of us declined, content to share the 1 gallon of ice cream instead. So basically, kind of an old, like another story of how things, how they kind of were back in not that long ago. I mean, really, we get a lot of people that actually talk to us about, well, this is I remember going to my grandparents' farm, and that's how they did it. They raised a couple things every year and had that, and that's what they put in the freezer. That's how they ate. And so kind of connecting to that. Thanks, Sarah, for the plug there. Sarah Locke put our website in there as well.
I have a question that might be oh, great. Sarah put your website. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. The bigger question too that we keep coming up with is that we know that industrial farming just isn't working for our planet. But also on the other side of that, can what you're doing be an answer for everybody, or is it just an answer for a smaller locality? Like, can we do it this way and still feed the planet? And I don't know how much I love that you're doing this for your community and your family and the relationships you have. But do you know if it, what does it mean in the scheme of things? And I don't know how much you've been able to, you don't have a lot of time. So
That's like the $1 million question is,
Yeah.
a lot of people will say that small local farms can't feed the world. But kind of the idea of being in your hometown, some of the people closest to us are not the ones who purchase from us. And that's kind of hard sometimes when people know what we're doing and how we're doing it, and like still don't necessarily support it. That was really hard in the beginning. But I think the whole movement of local agriculture, it would work, I think, if everyone had their local, like if there was someone in their community and people supported local. When you think about like chicken on the grocery store shelf, that chick had to get to the farm and was likely trucked to the farm. It probably wasn't born there. It's raised on that farm, and then it's trucked to a processing plant, and then it's trucked to, likely the packaging is on the same place as the processing, and then it's trucked to a grocery store or a distribution center, and then to a grocery store. So the amount of things that go into it, you can't tell me that that chicken costs 99 cents a pound with all of those pieces that play into it. And so a difficulty for us is the cost, because it is more expensive than stuff in the grocery store. And people often make sure that we realize that, like we've never been in a grocery store before. But it's the whole cost of the process. And so like I guess the two things that we would say, or that I would say, and Brandon can add to it, is that if we probably as a society are eating too much meat anyway, like the amount, like people didn't eat meat at 3 meals a day with a snack of chicken nuggets, like, I don't know, 40 years ago. Like that just wasn't how much meat we consumed. And so as like meat farmers, we would say that as a whole society, like we eat more meat than we probably should. So if we consumed less meat, and we're willing to support the local agriculture, I think that small farms could support their communities, and it could feed the world, with also practices that are easily replicable. Our chicken shelters that we raise our chickens in, that are moved every day, are easily replicable and scalable for anyone. If you wanted to raise 5 of them in your backyard kind of thing, you could do that. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, a big part of ours too. I get this question all the time, really, and there's no perfect answer. So, but the big thing we always do is educating folks about the system and about us and how we're doing it and what we're doing, and so they understand the cost. But Sarah, that good point there is like that. Just historically, we didn't eat as much meat, and there are all kinds of falsehoods about the only way to get protein is through meat, and that's not true. There's lots of vegetables that carry lots and lots of protein and are really, really good. But there are other things, the micronutrients inside of certain meats that do feed our body differently. And the big thing is that it's all about just how can you have access to it and get access to it. So honestly, there's not enough small farms in our areas to be able to suffice the demands here. But could there be? Yes. I mean, you can raise chickens on your own property in your backyard. And so, it's always been, we sell eggs. So why would we sell young laying hens? Because there are just different people that are just going to buy eggs. And there are people that, hey, if we can educate them enough that they would think, okay, if I put 3 or 4 chickens in my backyard, I'd probably have enough eggs for me and from both my neighbors on both sides. And so educating about that kind of thing, lowering food waste at the same time. There's just different aspects of it. So much of it is education part of it. But in reality, we are raising more animals and more pounds of meat, if you want to put it in that thing, per acre than anything that's conventional style is. They might have more per acre in a feed lot, but there's also all the acres that are growing the feed in another location. And so historically here in our county, in our area, if you were to go to the local ag office extension, ask them, okay, well, I want to start farming. I want to raise cattle. I have 10 acres. They'll probably tell you, well, you can have 5 cows and that's it. 2 acres to the head. That's it. We have a herd of about 30 cows with moms and babies and everything, since we end up raising them out for about 2 years. So this is the whole thing, on definitely right around or less than 30 acres. And potentially in the years to come, as we make those acres more and more productive, then we can add more and more head to that. So there's no limit to like how refined we can get with the system. Do we need to stockpile? We do a lot of stockpiling too. So as they're rotating around, as the season comes to an end, and they're starting to get too cool and starting to not be in that growing season, we have several paddocks ahead of them that have already grown back out. And so we're feeding less hay, we're hauling less material. We're actually just depending on the animals just to go and harvest it themselves. That cuts down on a lot of just transportation stuff as well. There's just so many aspects of it. It's just such a hard question to kind of go through and answer. But really, if everybody did their part and had a little bit in their community, even if it's one person in the community has a garden, but everybody chips in and helps out with that, then that could be a very productive garden. That could be, there's just so much more you can make off of that, because you're kind of at an efficiency. I don't know if that answers the question, or if anybody has any additional questions alongside of that.
It makes me think of, and I'm sorry, if you guys want a word in edgewise, you'll have to put it in the chat, because I have a lot more questions. And I get to do the mute button. Woo-hoo. But my question is too, you mentioned it's really hard to educate the people that your neighbors, right? And I'm really curious about, how can we speak to people who might be losing their farms, who might be like the heartache that goes along with farming in general, period. Yeah. But then on top of that, to have this conversation about how do you change methods and take even more risk when you've put all of your investments in another way of farming and being. Can we ask traditional farmers to even make this kind of a switch? And what is our work as people of in this ministry to do it without, I don't want to be non-confrontational, but I also don't want to shame and guilt trip everyone into action.
No, I think it's a lot of it is just to do it and let folks realize it or see it in the long run. There are a lot of folks around here that probably won't ever admit it, but have seen how our property has changed, have seen that we're, becoming, successful with all of those things. And so I think it's just one of those, kind of cliche thing to say, but just continue to do it. And then folks will see the benefits in the long run.
It actually sounds kind of Christ-like. Just I don't know.
Like as someone who came into the farming not having any background, it was really easy for me in the beginning because we have friends who have chicken houses or turkey houses. When the trucks come in and they've spread all the droppings out of the chicken houses, they've cleaned them out because you can smell it. And I just was I don't understand why they do that. It's just so terrible. And Brandon's always from the very beginning, reminded me that some people, not everyone, but some of these people have gone into it to save their farms. So maybe growing up, this land was farmed in a way that was sustainable for creation and cared for all aspects of it. And it wasn't like they were well, I don't really care about the creation anymore, but this is the only way that I can keep this land and make a profit and keep it in my family, or we lose it. And I would think, and I think that all farmers, regardless of what they're doing, do feel called to it. You don't choose this life. It chooses you in a lot of ways. People don't choose careers that are filled with so much unknown and heartache and difficulty and manual labor. A lot of times it's survival of their family farms, and they feel that this is their vocation. And so that kind of adds an element to not, like, I know you said you don't want to shy away from confrontation, but because even if there's someone on this call who is vegan and thinks, like, we raise our meat for food and we think we do it in a respectful way, but there's an element where maybe we won't ever come to the same conclusion. But hopefully people can respect the ways in which we feel that God has called us to the work that we're doing, which is, I mean, that's hard when you like come on different sides of the topic. But yeah. And I think that was a little bit of what the conversation with Bishop Eaton, it was how do we connect with farmers and how do we reach out to them? I think the most important relationships are built locally. And also, I can't tell you the number of times that it makes me smile when I hear farmers mentioned in the prayers of the people. And so ways in which we are spotlighting and shining a light on farmers, no matter what they are raising or growing. One of the farmers that in the very beginning Brandon learned a lot from said that, like, agriculture will have reached a point when on the sidelines of a soccer field and these parents are going down the line saying, my kid wants to be a doctor, well, my kid wants to be a teacher, and someone with pride says, my kid wants to be a farmer. Because at the church I used to work at, one of the moms came up to me and she was frantic. She's like, Tyler wants to be a farmer. And I was like, that's awesome. She said, no, it's not. And I was like, oh, but it could be so cool. So.
Thank you for that. Cheryl is asking, what resources can you suggest for someone who might want to raise a few chickens in their backyard? And anything, links that you think of later too, I'll add to that post. But do you want to speak to that?
Definitely get you some links later, but just first off, just go get them. Everybody needs 3 or 4 chickens. I'm telling you, it's not as hard as people always trying to make it out to be as well. They do really well eating like kitchen scraps from all your vegetables. So the butt ends of lettuce or, the peels of all this kind of stuff, you really can feed them a lot of different stuff. And they produce really high quality eggs. There's simple stuff like Story's Guide to Raising fill in the blank. There's one for goats, sheep, chickens, all those. There's lots of resources online for like just with some videos of how to build.
What about somebody on the call like what about somebody like Pat Almonroad, who's on the call and lives in Manhattan? What do you suggest for people that live in apartments or in public housing or in how does
I think everybody should get together and get one of those coops on the roof and just put like a bunch of them in there together, right? And then just like on the inside, they can grow their vegetables in the vertical gardens, and I'm sure there's an empty lot somewhere, which we've seen a lot of new things. If you haven't seen those abandoned lots in bigger communities where people are making community gardens, and it's like that what I was talking about earlier, people kind of all pitching in to help out with that, and then being able to reap the rewards of that garden. And nobody lives, even if you're in one of the major cities, nobody lives with the outside of a day's trip to go and get meat or vegetables or whatever and come back. We're still very well connected with everything where you can actually go and pick up your produce or your meats or things and come back. It may take a little bit more planning than just running by the grocery store on the way home, but it is a part of it. So
Phoebe, I just feel like I have to respond to that. First of all, I got one word for you, Phoebe, and that's pigeons.
Pigeons.
Don't need chickens.
Are they the chickens of the city?
Exactly. And just real quick, Sarah and Brandon, yeah. Just wanted to tell you, I do live in Manhattan. I've lived here for almost 25 years now, but I was born in South Carolina. I was born in Charleston. So there you go. And both of my parents were from Tennessee. So, and I grew up most of my childhood in Virginia. So I know the South. And
you're a Southern boy.
It's wonderful to hear your accents. I really love it. Then just one other real quick thing. Even though I live up here in Manhattan, I live pretty close to a park. Most of the land in that park is very steep and hard to maintain. It's got a lot of weeds on it, a lot of like just thistles and stuff like that. And so for the past 2 years now, some municipal organization has brought in a herd of goats from someplace up in northern New York. And they're down here for the summer for like, I don't know, a couple of weeks, maybe longer. They have the running of the goats when they come in. And it's loads of fun. So anyhow, thank you very much for being on tonight, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of my favorite ones is, if you are on Instagram, Star Creek Land in like California area. They are using goats and sheep as fire control for areas, and really turn them into certain areas really hard. They graze down that brush, and then there's less fuel there for any kind of fires. Again, that goes back to the natural part of it, is that nature knows best. So nature is going to go back to a wild state. Nature is going to have these things that are going to go, those weeds or anything like that kind of should or can dictate, or kind of can tell you that the soil's lacking there for something. And so nature is trying to kind of put out something that those weeds would be able to do. But again, the animals being able to be actually a positive for that area, and a positive for controlling that. And so really and truly, that there is a really good example as well. Is sometimes this kind of farming and this kind of stuff, or options like that, can be on the fringes. It doesn't have to be a wide open 400-acre pasture land. It's folks raise hundreds of rabbits a year in shelters, and feeding them really high quality hay and stuff in like less than a 2 or 3 car garage space. So folks are doing that in different ways. Openly, I mean, really, that was just so, it was so different. Our way of living and our like societies and our communities and stuff are so different from where they were nearly like maybe just within 50 years, less than a whole century. So like, within 50 years there's been so much change. And have we really looked at agriculture and how agriculture can be a part of that, or how agriculture has been impacted by that? And so really, where do we really kind of we can all learn something. I think it's one of the main things too, is that we can always learn something.
And I was trying not to get the stage too much, but I am really curious too as to what you would ask our advocacy offices, or local groups, to help be able to push for anything for those of us who aren't farmers but already buy from local farmers. What would you like to see in the next farm bill?
That's really a good question. I'm not super up to date on all legislation and different things, and it's just so much that can change. But what I would say is, every day you may, there's a saying, like, you may need a doctor, you may need a lawyer, you may need all these people with all these different types of skills once in a lifetime, or maybe a handful of times. But every day you eat 1, 2, 3 meals, depending on how much you intermediate fast or fast from different meals. But every day you are interacting with food. And so every day you vote with your dollar on where you spend that money for your food. And by every person that takes a chance to slow down a little bit, make a decision about how they're spending their money and what food they're purchasing, makes a vote for farmers like me to know that we're heading in the right direction. If we gain another customer who is serious enough to say, we want to start buying meat from you, we want to buy shares, then that's a pretty big commitment. And normally they've already bought from us little pieces here, a little bit there. But whenever we know that they're at that point, they're voting with that much of their annual money or their monthly money to buy meat from us, shows us that, hey, at least for us and for that family, this is very important. And that's really where we've kind of moved towards in this most recent season, is that, really, we could try to focus on trying to raise, product for, 1,000 families, or we can really focus on trying to feed the ones that are like our dedicated people that that are buying a lot of their meats from us and stuff. And so we really kind of shifted to doing that. But I would say, go back to answer the question I kind of did there, but basically vote with your dollar every day. I mean, choose choices that are going to be, that look out for the earth, or look out for your health, or look out for, supporting local farms. I also, this may open up a whole can of worms, but I also manage another farm that's going to be doing some of the same things. And so I manage that for a community. And we're kind of voting with our dollars. What do we want to put in our marketplace there? Who do we want to support? What are some of the other farms that are doing things that we're not doing that we want to support? So we go and buy milk from a local farm and then put that milk in our store. And that's a way that we can we can use our community to support that farm. Because we don't provide the milk, and we don't have anybody in the community that does. So now we're a wholesale client for them, and they're able to increase their production, and us be able to bring that to there. And I'm really big on trying to make sure that we're trying to be, efficient and trying to do well with that. So we're actually trading, basically, we're taking some of the fruits and vegetables that we're raising and to that community and dropping them off, and we're bringing stuff back to our community that we don't have. And so, really work together, get creative, find somebody to buy half a cow with, find somebody to buy a share of chickens with, find somebody to go in. If you can't go and pick up a CSA every week, then find somebody that you can join in with, and you go once a month and pick it up, or or go in together and buy it. There's so many times that it can be more inconvenient, or more, it could take more work. But sometimes the right thing is a little bit harder. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to do. It may seem a little harder to do that. I don't get up and go run every morning because that's too hard, but like I probably should. So it's just, everybody has those things. We can kind of think about it a different way. Don't close the book on it. Just say, I can't dedicate a day every week to go, 3 hours to the farm and get, pick up my products. What can you do? Even in like the grocery stores, even if you're not going to like a Whole Foods place, you can buy, different style stuff. You can buy, cage-free eggs, or you can buy, just research all that stuff. But you can vote every time with your dollar. Where do you want to see more of? What do you want to see more of?
I think one thing that is difficult for small farms like ours, someone said, like local meat processors. So a reality of small farms is where the processing facilities are, because for a small farm, I don't think you'd really want to, but you can't go to the like large, massive processing plants. They're local, they're custom, and they're few and far between. So I don't even know what that would look like in a farm bill, but what would it look like if churches partnered in a community with local farms, meat farmers, to have somehow the financial backing to open up their own small custom processing facility? Because that's one thing that, especially with COVID, was a reality for us, was that even at the small places where we can go, they're not very close. And they were booking up so fast because everyone was trying to get it in, because like there wasn't meat on the grocery store shelves, and like they wanted to come to local farmers. What we found is that that excitement didn't sustain, which is fine for us in the way that we were selling it. But I know for a lot of farms, they upped their production. But that's a speed bump. That's a hurdle for a lot of small local farms like ourselves, is finding place to have it processed. Like we can do some things on farm, but the biggest thing for that is financial, like what's the word I'm looking for? The capital to start it.
Investment. Yeah. Yep. Well, it has been an hour, and I just want to be respectful of everyone's time, and especially yours, since you both have children. Hopefully they're still in the house somewhere. They haven't left, but
They are. They're
they're on a farm. It's okay. Chickens got them. We're good. But I really appreciate, I know that there might be more questions, and I really appreciate everybody sharing a lot in the chat, which I will also share in the follow-up post. And if you both think of specific things that can help, anyone else either do this on their own, but also find their own local farms, I think that's another big next step, that those of us sitting in the pews can think of this as part of our ministry, person by person. And I really appreciate your perspective. This is a much bigger topic that we're trying to dive into more and more, from being, vegan to the whole full spectrum. There's a lot of in between. And as we talk about just being kinder to our bodies and to the planet, I really appreciate hearing your perspective, because you live it and you've lived through it. And I just really appreciate how honest we've both been and spent so much time. So thank you very, very much. And I hope you stay engaged with us. I'm grateful that you're part of Lutherans Restoring Creation. I did just recently ask Cheryl Muroff to close us out in prayer. So let's see if you can unmute Cheryl, if you're still there.
I am unmuted myself.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for closing us.
Creator God, your Son, Jesus Christ, is the good shepherd of the sheep and all animals. And we pray for all of those who give their lives to the care of animals. We especially pray for Sarah and for Brandon and for the work they're doing. We ask that you would help all of us make wise decisions about our food, help us to be mindful of supporting people who are giving great thought to raising animals and all types of garden produce in more natural ways that sustain the earth and God's creation. And we ask that you would also help us be mindful in finding ways to support the farmers that are nearby. Bless all of us as we make these decisions about our food. And we ask all of this in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all so much. Have a great night. I can stay on to for any other questions about Lutherans Restoring Creation stuff for a few minutes if anybody has questions, and I will stop recording.